Hello and welcome. Come on in, make yourself comfortable, sit down. I have my cup of tea here, ready to go. And gang's all here. We've got a fab panel with us today and literally hundreds of questions that you guys have sent in for us to answer. So we're going to let everyone kind of get in, settle down, and then we will dig into it. So what are we talking about today? Your path to business growth. This is part of our partnership with Lloyds Bank Academy. And we are really excited about this because growth is such a hot topic this year. Time you read the newspaper or something from the government, don't talk about growth. What on earth do we mean by growth? And is it possible? And are we just surviving? We're going to get into that. There's a QR code on your screen. So I want to point that out because the screen's not staying up forever. So you can go and have a look at the Lloyds Bank Academy. Now, you don't have to be a Lloyds customer. It's all free to access. Really great help and advice and skills training. So please do go and have a look there. So welcome. I am going to ask my wonderful panel to introduce themselves to start with, and then we will dig into all the questions that you've sent in. Just a little, as I'm sure people will start in the chat pretty soon, just a little guidance. If you want to ask another question or if you want to clarify a question you've sent in, can you put it in the Q&A box down below? Just because sometimes it can be quite hard to keep track of what's going on in the chat. Whereas if in the Q&A box, we can see what people are asking. So Emma, seamlessly, the screen will disappear and my panel is going to appear in front of you. So I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves, starting with, in no particular order, Lara.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Lara Omoloja. I run Greenwich Pantry. Greenwich Pantry is a food business. We focus on cooking schools for kids and adults and operating cafes. We're based in South London and we welcome everyone. So please do pop along whenever you can.
Thanks, Lara. Betsy.
Good morning. Yes, I run my luxury stationery and gift brand, Betsy Benn. We're based in Cheltenham. This is our 15th business year, and this will be our 16th Insane Christmas. Fingers crossed it's an Insane Christmas, please. Thank you very much. Customers come this way. Food and stationery, two of our favourite things. I'm just getting distracted by the chat. I have a team of 4 and we hang out and make things and eat cake.
The joy. I mean, it's the dream. Geoff.
Morning all, I'm Geoff Wilkinson. I'm Managing Director at Wilkinson Construction Consultants. We are a service consultancy to the construction industry, so quite different to the other two speakers. And hopefully we can bring something a little different to the chat today for businesses who aren't selling stuff directly.
Amazing. Well, look, guys, thank you so much. We're going to jump straight on in, if that's okay. The topic today is growth. And I'm going to ask you to excuse me if my doggies bark at some point. I have 2 doggies who are joining me for today. They are very enthusiastic about business growth. So we've had a lot of questions come in about growth. Some of them very specific about your business, and we'll dig into that. And some that are kind of a bit more kind of big picture. So I want to start with some of the big picture stuff. And I think also important to talk about what do we mean by growth? There we go.
This is exactly what my dog will do. The door goes.
I love them. They have to stay with me all the time. What do we mean by growth? Because the thing, actually, sometimes what we hear from small businesses is like, do you know what? The last few years has been really tricky. There's been a lot of complexity, a lot of things going on, costs going up, interest rates going up, inflation, etc. Actually, I'm more worried about survival, just keeping going. And what we would say to you is, if you want to survive, if you want to keep going, the best way to do it is to focus on growth. Thinking of if that's a really good discipline for you and your business, and think about how to do things better, how to move the business forward, is going to help you to kind of keep the lights on, and actually hopefully takes away some of that panic that we can get when we kind of put our head down and we're just thinking about the day to day and just trying to get stuff done and just trying to churn through it, but actually trying to think a little bit more strategically. So think about working on the business rather than in the business. I know that's really hard to do if you're feeling quite stressed, and we know lots of businesses are feeling quite stressed. So I want to talk about, so the first question that we're sent, what are the key levers of growth that I should be looking at? And I think this kind of speaks to, like, what do we mean as growth? So to give my perspective and then ask my my fabulous panel their thoughts on it. The first thing I just wanted to say right at the beginning is, remember that you want bottom line growth, not top line growth. What do we mean? So we want growth to profit, not growth to revenue. And I think that's really important, because actually what we find often, small businesses are really focused on the top line, on selling, on getting stuff in, and less focused on the bottom line, which really is what counts. That's the money we've got left at the end. And actually we can spend a lot of energy churning through, trying to drive more and more sales. But if they're not really making us a lot more money, then we're kind of burning through energy. And actually, as small businesses, we don't have a lot of that to spare. So I would say the number one thing, if you're thinking about the key lever of growth, is to look at your costs surgically. So when you're thinking about growing, what are the different ways that you could do it that are a bit more cost effective? Like, can you use AI or technology used at a lower cost? Some of that is, maybe you want to put more content out. You might want to do more sales pitches. You might want to do some more press releases, or you might want to run your website without, to scale it, but without bringing additional staff in. Lots of different ways technology can help you, but keeping those costs a bit lower. So costs, very important for growth. Guys, panel, can I ask you to chip in? What do you think about? What are your thoughts about that, Lara?
I think that when you are growing as a small business, you really got to think about, do you want to grow the depth or is it the breadth? And I think what you were saying about bottom line is really, really important, because I find that sometimes when you've made a head decision to grow the depth, you're actually in a better place to think about bottom line, because the minute, what I mean by, what I mean by breadth, don't you? You're adding on more things and you're doing this and doing that. Or is it that you just want to stay in one place and look at how far you can go and how deep you can go into that particular business? I don't know if anyone else kind of figures out what I'm trying to say, because I think it also impacts on your ability to deliver and to deliver properly.
I think that's a really good point. I think by depth thinking, like, what do I do and how do I do that better? How do I do it more effectively? How do I do it more cost effectively? How do I make more out of my current space? As opposed to maybe spreading yourself a bit thin, trying to do everything, which might not necessarily be profitable. And I love that kind of breadth versus depth. Geoff, you're nodding there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the first questions that I always think of is, do you actually want to grow? And that sounds a stupid question. When we're talking about growth, often we're talking about taking on extra employees or taking on extra premises. That is a huge commitment. The point that you were making, well, actually, can I not grow in that sense, but can I grow the profit that I've got, is actually far more sustainable than this chasing the dream that requires a lot of investment. As soon as, we'll probably come on to this a bit later on, but as soon as you start taking on employees, etc., you're taking yourself away from the things that you do well. And if you do want to scale up later on, I think you've really got to work on how you get the systems in place to enable those growth. So if you're going to take on a second property or you're going to take on extra services, how are you actually going to deliver those? So yeah, I'd absolutely agree with Lara. Focusing on what you actually do best and making sure that you can get growth in bottom line cash terms out of that. Brilliant idea.
So yeah, we're getting our ducks in a row before we are going out into the brave new world. I love that. Betsy?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that everyone has already said. And I just think if you are not sure what to do, the added little extra that you can think about with growth is think of it like a garden. Your business is like a garden. You'll have times where you're going to be sowing your seeds, your little thoughts and your little kind of nuggets of maybe product development or, delivery options. And then you're going to have a flowering time, you're going to have a harvest time. There's always little things that you can do in everything. And I think especially this year, people are feeling, how can I sell to somebody when no one has any money? And I think that is feeling to a lot of small business owners like it's hampering their growth. But you can grow in your brand awareness. You can grow by adding the magic back in. You can grow by talking to your customers, meeting them where they are. Maybe they're not buying things right now, but maybe they are looking for information. Maybe they're looking for a company that they will use in 2 months' time or 6 months' time that align with their values. So there's always something that you can tend to in your big garden that is your business.
I love that. That's very beautiful. And it's a really good point, actually, although that if you are finding your customers aren't spending, the chances are they're spending something. They're spending something somewhere. And if you do, as Betsy said, like if you focus on you and your business and building those relationships, finding those values that you have in common, making sure that you are kind of front line for them, they will come back. They will come back. I wanted to kind of, I saw a comment in the chat, which we are going to come back to, which is about how to grow if you don't have cash or you can't get investment. We are going to come to that one in just a second. So just bear with us. But there was an interesting question about what would you do differently if you were starting your growth phase again. And I think this is really important because often we look at particularly successful businesses and think they must have had a great strategic plan. There must have been like clear steps to get there if I should follow those steps. And I just wanted to say, what would I do differently? Almost everything. Literally almost everything. Honestly, we should do a whole session on all the ways that we've messed up, because if there's a mistake you can make, I have made it 100%, absolutely promise. But still standing here, I actually believe quite strongly in making mistakes because you just kind of give things a go and you go for it. But actually, I think one of the things that I found, and I'm going to hear from our panel on this, is that when you are growing, when you're busy and things are crazy, you have your head down in delivery a lot, and you're often not noticing the things that you could do better. You're just kind of doing it because the effort to change it is just, I can't put my head into that right now. There's only me and a small team, and I can't quite get there. And then I look, and then eventually someone, usually a mentor, someone external, might be another organization that I admire, or a member of my staff who kind of goes on the door. There's no real doors in my business, just so you know, it's a metaphorical door. And I go, do you know what? I could have been doing that so much better for the last 18 months. Do you know what? I could have saved money there. So firstly, I would say don't beat yourself up if you get it all wrong, because we all get it wrong every day, all the time. But also, if you can open yourself up to take a step back and try to step out of the day-to-day, and maybe ask your friends, ask your peers, you know, how do you do stuff? What could you do differently? And often that's where there's kind of nuggets, you know, don't have to spend money on this. You could change that. You could switch out that software. You could renegotiate that. So lots and lots of different things. And look at my team, Geoff, what would you do differently?
Well, I'm slightly different to yourself because I did have a plan. I've always had a plan. I've had a fantastic plan. I've never followed it, but I've always had the plan. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways that it's quite important to still have that idea of where you're intending to go, and then try and compare that with where you actually are. If you don't have any idea, I think you do start to become very scattergun, and you go, oh, well, this is I'm very tempted to go, oh, shiny thing, look, what's that up there? I'll go off and start doing that. And it takes you away from doing the things that you really need to be doing. And particularly in our sector, or potentially even for the people who are then starting to get into property, it's very, very expensive. Okay, they're very expensive mistakes to make. Yeah, if you've put out the wrong product or something, then maybe you can come back from that. If you've committed yourself into a 5-year lease on a property and you're not selling at the rate that you should be, that could be the difference between you succeeding and failing. So yes, I'm all for gung-ho, go out there, make mistakes, but make relatively cheap mistakes. Don't make very expensive mistakes is the first thing I'd say.
I think that's absolutely fair. And I'm not saying go make expensive mistakes. I think that the challenge is to try and to stop ourselves, to take a step back and go, maybe I could get some help. Maybe someone else might have a different perspective on this. Because if I do keep my head down, I am going to make those mistakes, and I have done. Betsy, what are your thoughts on this one?
Like you, I no plan. I'm not. Do I admit now in front of everyone that I still don't have a plan? Oh, look, I did. It was probably 5 years before I reached out to try and find anybody doing the same thing as me, or having a little bit of more advice position than my mum. And spoiler, your mum will always go, yeah, it's great. So I think the thing that I say to everybody when they say what would be the thing that you would recommend to other small business owners is find a tribe. It doesn't even have to be a mentor. It could just be 2 or 3 people who are on, the same sort of path as you, because no one will understand that journey more than somebody else that's doing the same thing. And on a very, very practical point, when I was in an employed job, I was very adamant about putting money into a pension, and then I went self-employed, and it's like I lost all of the intelligence I had gathered around how important pensions were, and didn't put anything for 10 years. So don't do that. Even if you're doing a little, don't forget to take the learnings from your corporate world into your new world.
I think that's a really good point. It's very easy to sort of go, oh yeah, I'll think about the future later, and just a little bit of thought about it now is going to pay off in the long term. So Natty said, did the same, but no, yeah, I mean, absolutely, I did the same when I left a big corporate. Lara, thoughts on this?
Yes, networks, and it's no secret that I found my love for small business Britain a few years ago, and they were the perfect networks for me because they had the right kind of, you guys, the right kind of businesses that I could associate with, that kind of got me thinking, and I think we underestimate the importance of networks for lots of different reasons. Sometimes it takes up time, and sometimes, we just feel like we can't really contribute. And that's all that's fair. But I think what networks do in this growth conversation is they get you thinking about, oh, what could I do with that? Somebody's just talked about some software that they use that doesn't cost any money, and you've been paying, £2,000 a year for no reason.
I've been there. I've actually literally been there. Yes.
And you're thinking, oh my goodness, what have I just done? As Geoff said, I've made a very expensive mistake. So I think networks are important in the growth phase, and they can't be underestimated. I think that we should, if you're a small business, get together with some kind of network that you click with and that helps you. If you've got loads of time, maybe you want a face-to-face kind of network. If you've not got lots of time, get on the webinars, listen, podcasts, anything like that. It just gets you thinking, and it also stops you making mistakes that might be too costly, and helps you to be more creative as well.
I like that point, the more creative bits, actually. And I think that's really important. And sometimes when we're head down in the business and we're not kind of looking up for air, we lose some of that creativity, and other people can really spark that in us. I want to jump into the finance question, just because there's a lot of questions on this, and we're talking about growth and this, but I can't grow. I haven't got money. I haven't got finance. So there was a lot of questions sent in on this one. So I'm going to pick a couple of them out. So one is, how is a small business expected to grow if they can't get loans? So I want to unpick this a little bit. There are some loan schemes available. There are other options. I just wanted to say, it's a sort of a big picture. almost all small businesses grow in the UK without external finance. Now, I'm not saying that's the best way to do it, but statistically, that is actually the case. There is quite a risk aversion in UK businesses, actually, to taking out debt. We as Brits are quite anti-debt. I think that's actually a bad thing. I think good debt can be incredibly helpful to your business and can really kind of, with a good plan and knowing exactly what you're doing and make sure keeping the costs low can be really, really helpful. However, as Brits, we are quite risk averse when it comes to debt and tend to not take out debt to grow. So firstly, it's absolutely possible to grow without bringing in external finance. So I would see it as an option, but don't see it as the be all and end all, if that's the sort of, I say this with our partners Lloyds on the call, and I think they would definitely agree with that too. I would say definitely have a chat with your bank as a first port of call, not necessarily to take out a loan or get product from them, but because they know millions of other businesses, they know loads of people who've been in your situation. They will, we've got a friendly local bank manager, keeps sending me emails going, how's it all going? And I don't engage enough, actually. And I think that there's lots of opportunities as a business to have conversations like that. But so have a conversation, have a little think about how you might want to grow. Working capital in the business can be a great route to that. So if you start thinking about, how can you manage those costs, other things that you can save there, that might open up some opportunity to grow without bringing in debt. If you do want to look at debt, and actually a lot of our research from last year shows that people use credit cards a lot to grow, would suggest that's not the best route to go down. I know a lot of people often go down that route. I mean, sometimes because it feels more immediate, it feels more accessible, or they're worried they won't get a loan, or they might get turned down for a loan and they go to credit cards. If you can avoid that, I would definitely do that. There are some schemes available that I did want to mention, and then I'll ask the panel their thoughts on this. One is the Growth Guarantee Scheme. So this is a government-backed, it was a scheme. It's actually delivered by financial institutions, banks, but it's backed by the government. So it was originally launched as the COVID recovery scheme, something like that. They all had funny names at that point, but it was the sort of next wave on after bounce back loans and COVID loans. It starts at 25 grand, so it's a bit chunkier than some other loan programs. So that might not be for you because it might be a bit much. But if it is, the government backs 70% of the loan. So what we've heard from a lot of financial institutions is they like this because it takes the risk off them. And particularly if you're a business that doesn't have a lot of assets, as we have a huge amount of service businesses in the UK, they're not sitting on lots of assets. That's great for banks because the government's taking a lot of the risk. So they're more likely to lend. So if you're looking at, 25 grand or over as maybe how much you might need to go down your growth plan, when you've got a plan, have a look at the Growth Guarantee Scheme. So if you go on the British Business Bank's website, they've got a list of delivery partners on there too. So do have a bit of a look at that. If you're in the first 3 years of your business, you could look at a startup loan, and they start, at like much, much smaller amounts. It is very much for the first few years of business. So go and have a look at that. Again, that's a government-backed program. They've delivered over 100,000 of these to small businesses, and actually they're very keen to tell us that they have a high percentage of women, they have a high percentage of ethnic minority and disabled founders accessing startup loans. So if you are in the early few years, do go and have a look at that. There is stuff available. So I just want to say there are stuff out there. I think we are all in agreement that there's a lack of options at the moment for small businesses. I think particularly compared to other countries, but there is stuff there. And I would always talk to your accountant and talk to your bank because you'd be surprised what's sitting out there. I want to open it up to my panel and ask them their thoughts on growth finance. I maybe come to Betsy because she smiled when I said that. So I'm going to come to you first.
Go ahead, Betsy.
I was very fortunate, and I think a lot of women do this in terms, I took redundancy, and so I had a small amount of money in a pot, and that gave me the means to just buy a few capital things, which, yeah, absolutely was a godsend. And then I was really stringent about this experiment of a business couldn't cost me anything. You know, I was against getting myself into debt for it, and that's a personal thing rather than a business thing. Now though, we have a little more of a relaxed approach to things, but we tend to go into what can we do for free? You know, how can we talk to our customers for free? So we maintain our own email database, which isn't something that we started doing in the first couple of years. And again, I wish somebody had told me that when I first started my business. Control your own customer database. Don't rely on Instagram, because it could just go down tomorrow and then you can't talk to your customers. But make use of Instagram, make use of Facebook, make use of all of the social media things we didn't have 20 years ago. This is all like free channels to talk to people and to get in front of somebody that, you know, would have cost thousands and thousands of pounds to do that 20 years ago, I don't know, on the radio or on TV. And one of the ways that we look at that is we go into very specific Facebook groups. So we have a wedding range of products, and we go into very specific wedding Facebook groups where people are really looking for that product. And we just go, hi, we have something you might like. Not aggressively, not in any kind of way that's, you know, overly salesy, but constantly, every week, we make this now, we do this now. And that's time, that's not money. And time has its own cost, but I don't have to go to a credit card to get time. I just have to figure my world out.
Tending your garden there. Tending your garden. You are. Geoff, what are your thoughts on this?
So when we were setting up as a small business, we did what is not necessarily an unusual thing, which is we remortgaged. So we effectively took loan against our house, and obviously not everyone's in a position to be able to do that. But we were able to effectively fund 50,000 into the business by remortgaging. One of the key issues is, have you got that support? Have you got the family support in and around you? Because I think particularly as a small business, you're going to kind of need that. If my wife hadn't been on board with that, we would not have been doing this. I can guarantee you that. When you are looking to obtain funding anyway, really you need to understand. I know this is terribly boring and terribly businessy, but you need to understand your numbers. If you're going to attempt to get somebody else to invest in you, if you do not actually know or understand your numbers, you're unlikely to be someone that they want to invest in. If they're not wanting to invest in you, you perhaps need to ask yourself, why would I then take a mortgage out on myself to invest in myself? Well, obviously, I have confidence in myself. I'm wonderful, as all small businesses, all small business owners. We're wonderful. We're the driver of the business, and we are. But there's only so much of that you can do. And eventually, you're going to have to take on a member of staff. You're going to have to start thinking about horrible things like HR and payrolls and all of that. And how are you going to do it? Imagine everyone that's in a small business has gone through that period of time where you're not generating money and you go, oh, well, what I do is I'll just not pay myself. You can't do that when you've then got staff on board. Yeah. So you really have to understand the numbers and making sure that if you are taking out finance, and I think this is where the risk aversion part comes from, that you're actually going to be in a position to be able to maintain that through. So I think understanding your numbers and going to talk to the bank are important. I noticed that it did pop up very briefly. I'd really strongly advise people to go and speak to your local council as well, because there are a lot of local funding schemes that don't necessarily get a lot of attention, and local authorities are really good at supporting small businesses. They don't necessarily get a lot of the attention that they might otherwise get.
I love that. That's a great route. I saw Gail's dropped a few workshops in there that you can go. They're all free to access and open access in the chat. So do have a look at those as well. Lara.
Yes. Well, this is one of my biggest, most interesting topics: money, financing, business. I think for us, the first 5 years of running the business, it was all bootstrapping. And, it was really just about making the money stretch as far as possible. And there was a sensible part of me at the time which said, look, just grow in piecemeal, one step at a time. And I think that does affect the finance a lot. But also, you get to a point where that mentality has to change because you've then grown to a point and you're kind of wanting to get to your next point. And I think that's where something that both Geoff and Betsy has said comes into play. You have to know your numbers. You have to figure out what you can't spend money on that you can do in time, and you have to make sure that you're not overextending yourself, not on the breadth side of things. But one thing that's positive, I think I've seen in the last couple of years, is that the financial landscape has changed a lot. It's also bringing in a lot of digital ways of borrowing money that's not gonna sink you, and no advert for Zilch, but yesterday and the day before, I've seen a lot of stuff around Zilch. And they're a kind of one of these new banks. Well, they're not really a bank. They just they just lend money, don't they? But they lend in a short term and in a measured way. And I think that there are business options for things like Zilch. I think Zilch is more sort of a consumer thing, but there are business options as well. So I think it's about researching and understanding your business, whether it's seasonal, whether it's long term. There are products out there that can help you grow in a way that's not going to take you too far into debt where you're not comfortable. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the exciting thing that's happening at the moment. And I'm really pleased to see it because it's also supporting disabled founders. It's supporting people who maybe are not trusted to have loads and loads of money all at the same time. Can't think why, but hey, that's it.
No, you're right, actually. And there was a question about that. People have said they've got bad credit rating, they can't get debt. And actually, we know from the Lilac review that the final report launched on Monday this week, that often disabled founders are reticent to get debt because they're concerned about paying it back. What if I have to take a month off? What if, I'm on the hook for this and I lose my welfare and I then can't keep my life support going. There are lots of things going on there. I like what you said about starting small though. And actually, if you are a bit risk averse, if you are worried about taking on debt, starting small and creating a bit of a plan, like Geoff said, make a plan, start small, and then reap the benefits, which will give you the confidence to move on. And I one of the things that I really want to bang the drum a little bit about this year is good debt, is good finance, because I do think a lot of small businesses are held back by being so reticent to take on debt because they're worried about the risk of it. And of course it could be, and I've seen Susan saying debt's very frightening to me. It is I would say the majority of businesses very concerned about debt. It was an interesting thing during COVID with bounce back loans. And I think bounce back loans are a wonderful thing, by the way. I think they actually genuinely saved lives when they came out in May 5 years ago. 5 years ago, with some, people and businesses really on the edge. But actually, we spoke to some businesses who they were worried, but they weren't quite sure. So they took out it was very easy to get a bounce back loan. Whatever your thoughts on it, and we're not going down that route, it was very easy to get a bounce back loan. They took out the loan and were like, right, that's there as my safety net. Kind of let's see how things go. And we spoke to businesses that had never taken out debt before. It's the first time. There's 1.5 million bounce back loans went out the door. So lots of businesses, very first time they'd ever taken on debt, and then they'd used that money to grow and actually had a really good experience of it. And said, you know what? I never have done that if it hadn't been for this circumstance. But now I'm trading through different channels. I'm selling to different markets. I'm all over, I'm doing all these things that I never thought I could do. If you want to find something positive to come out of COVID, I think that's definitely one thing. So having that confidence to kind of go, do you know what? I'm going to do that new thing. I'm going to give that a go. I'm going to I'm going to really invest in that growth, can be really fantastic. And I know that there are things like, I want to talk about export a little bit, if you want to grow by selling to different countries. And big picture, if the market's a little flat at home, other countries are growing. Try not to be too concerned about the global headlines, trade tariff wars. Actually, one of the things that we're seeing because of the, so we say, uncertainty around tariffs with the US is that other countries are very keen to buy from the UK. We're seen as a real sort of safe haven, a very stable market. So if you're thinking about export, now might be a really good time to do that. New trade agreement with India. There's a big meeting with the EU. We're looking to reset the trading relationship with the EU. And actually, if you're thinking about growth and expanding, export could be a really good one for you. And also remember, this is not just about products. The UK exports more services, actually, than we do products. We're a big service exporter. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. A lot of small businesses, and I'm thinking maybe kind of in Betsy's world a little bit more than Lara and Geoff's, often start exporting almost by accident. And they get a customer from another country that comes to their website. Or you might be selling on an international platform, something like an eBay or other platforms are available. So customers will come to you on that and find you, and then suddenly you're like, oh crikey, I'm selling something to India, I'm selling something to Switzerland, or and you can accidentally start exporting that way. But there's loads of help and advice on this, so go and have a look at the Department for Business and Trade UK Export, and there's actually finance for this too. Finance for everything. And I wanted to mention that UK Export Finance is very keen that small businesses go and talk to them, so do check them out. Now, UK Export Finance, they don't give you the finance, but they guarantee the finance via your bank. And they just had the cap was raised a couple of weeks ago on how much they could guarantee, and they're super, super keen to support small businesses. So if you think that export might be an opportunity for you, definitely go and have a look at it. Go and check it out, because there's literally billions of people around the world who might want your product or service, and very keen to come to the UK. There's quite a buzz around it at the moment, so do go and check those guys out. I wanted to dip into something that came up quite a lot and Geoff mentioned, which is about hiring staff and bringing new people into the business. And often when people talk about growth, and Geoff is absolutely right, what they have in their head is like, well, that's more people. Growing your business means more people in the business. It absolutely doesn't have to, but of course it can, and sometimes it must, in order to deliver what you want to deliver. And I actually wondered if the team could give me a little bit of insight into their staff growth journey, and tell us. A little smile there from Betsy. Tell us a little bit about the highs and the lows, and see if we can kind of unpick this a bit for our audience. Betsy.
Yeah, quite quickly I realized that as much as I felt the pressure to do everything myself, and I felt like I couldn't pay somebody else to do something, because I in theory had the time. I think the first person I got was a bookkeeper, because she could do in 2 hours what would take me about 2 days to do. And that felt like,
so with you, I can't agree more.
But like the immediate clever decision. I was like, future me thanked past me so many times for that. And that was a massive learning point. And then I just applied that to everything. So I think the next person we had was a freelance graphic designer. Again, she was younger than me, fresher than me, had more time than me, and taught me some stuff too. So because my background is art, it's not really graphic design, so that switched to digital. Then I got a cleaner, because I was like, again, she's sorted, she knows exactly what she's doing, and it frees me up to do the weird, unusual things that I just, only I can do. Only the product ideas only come from me. And when you become your own bottleneck, you have to do something about it. And that's the process that we took. And I had a count up the other day. We've had over 100 people come through Betsy Benn, and that's not just staff. That could be. We reached out to a local university because in the graphic design course, they have to do a work placement. So we're like, yeah, come and do your work placement here. And it's not that they have got, 3 solid weeks and they're just going to be a work cow for you. That's not the idea of it. But you do get some support. You also get some new knowledge. And then they might even come back and want to work during the Christmas holidays. And you've got a partially trained possible freelance staff member out there. And we've had retired people come back and work with us, and we've had people just passing through on a 6-month stop into the UK. So just don't necessarily narrow it down into I have to get a secretary or I have to get a business manager. There are lots and lots and lots of ways that people can support your business now, and it doesn't have to be a PAYE employee, although we do have that now. So don't be frightened of it. What's the worst that can happen? Actually, that's a dodge question. But don't be
I may help on that.
I think Geoff's done all that. Do you know what? Actually, I always say all my best decisions and all my worst decisions are about people, and it can be completely transformative. And I would say all my team at the moment are absolute legends. The Small Business Britain team are completely brilliant. But yeah, and you don't. And I think that's a really good point, actually. And there were quite a lot of questions about this point. You do not have to bring someone in full-time on PAYE right from the start. That is not the only option for you and your business to bring in staff. And there's lots of things out there. There's freelancers, there's part-time, there's students, there's apprentices. Please don't forget about apprenticeships. There's a huge amount of funding out there for apprenticeships as well. Geoff, you are champing at the bit.
Yeah, I mean, picking up on the points you're making, definitely that's the way we started to grow early on, was to bring in part-time staff to assist in semi-retired people. Really, they have young trainees, etc., are great, but they do require a lot of mentoring, in my experience. Bringing in someone older, someone perhaps returning to the workplace, kids are growing up. But they could only work maybe between school hours or something like that. They're really great employees. They're some of the best employees that we've ever had, and that flexibility can really kind of boost you. One of the things that I would be very wary of is taking staff on in an employment basis if you haven't got some form of HR support of some description. You can really mess up. That's the really polite version of the words I was going to use on that. And you can find yourself in employment tribunals, and I've seen companies directly fail by it. We assume a lot of times that staff will reflect what you do. They'll reflect your personality. Your business for most of us is us. It's our personality. It's what we do. And you expect someone to come in and they'll be as keen to do what you're doing, and they won't. That's not reality. So making sure when you get the right when you're making a hire, you make the right hire. And boy, have I not made the right hires several times over my career. Many times I have not picked the right person for a variety of reasons, which I won't go into because some of them may be watching.
Well, all the things you did wrong webinar. That's that one. Yes.
Yeah, we'll keep it for that. But yeah, as I say, so be very careful about that. So if you can find some form of HR support, and I know there was sort of mention of Chamber of Commerce. Now, quite often the Chamber of Commerce will be able to help you with example contracts and that kind of stuff, and some helpful legal advice. So reach out to them perhaps before. There are some organisations that I feel are a little on the predatory side in trying to tie you into like a 5-year contract. So just be wary of what you're signing into if you're reaching out for HR support. Just because they're number one on the Google search doesn't mean to say they're necessarily the right fit for your small business. So reach out. Organisations like Small Business Britain, of course, can help direct you. I think we've already said about the value of networking and working together.
We've worked with some really amazing small business HR businesses, and exactly, you don't necessarily have to have them like on contract, but they're for specific things, creating contracts for you, giving advice, helping when you get a bit stuck. That is completely invaluable. The thing that we tend to think about, if I think about it in my head now, is if I'm going to bring in a member of staff, am I completely sure I can fund it for 2 years? That's my kind of horizon. You never know about the whole future. You can't predict everything. But am I very clear that I've got the funding for this for 2 years? And that's the point when I'll think about, okay, another permanent member of staff. But bringing in freelancers, I mean, we work with so many freelancers doing lots of different things, and they're completely amazing, and they want to work as a freelancer. So that's absolutely fine. We work with other organizations. We partner with organizations a lot. There's lots of ways. And actually, if you look at the whole UK landscape of small businesses, now there's 5.5 million small businesses, 4.8 million of those don't have staff. And that doesn't mean that they're not doing stuff, just like businesses that have staff, but they work with freelancers, might work with students, they work in partnerships, they work with other businesses. That's the brilliance of the world of small business in the UK today. It's such a great market to start and grow your business in a much more low risk, much more flexible way. So I definitely encourage you to look at that and look at alternative ways that you can boost your resource without necessarily taking on kind of long-term commitments that might feel a bit scary and a bit risky. Lara, what's your experience on this?
Yes, I just completely agree with Geoff and, what Betsy was saying about pulling people from different places to come and work. And you also were saying about, please don't think you have to employ anyone full time when you're working, when you need somebody for your business. You don't have to do that. And I think what Betsy's outlined is really important. You've got universities wanting to, get some of their students to do projects on a short-term basis. But all of that also depends on how your operation works. So when I started, mine was about outsourcing, outtasking, collaborating. And for a lot of that, I didn't really need staff. But when I started to grow, I very quickly realized that I did need people, but then I had to pull people from the flexible part-time working pool. And there is a lot of people there. And I think that over the years, what I've seen is that those people have been better highlighted in society than previously. Previously, you had to kind of look for them. You had to kind of know somebody who who has 3 hours between going to pick up a child from school or, dropping off. But nowadays, it's more open. And there are actually platforms where you can find people like that. So I think, do be careful, though, with the platforms. You're not always going to get the right person to do the right thing. But if there are some trusted ones that are vetting people and who can really jump in on your business because they've already got the knowledge, you don't have to spend too much time mentoring them. I think that if you can tap into that kind of landscape where people can be on your business to support you as soon as possible, that then builds future employees, because then you've got them as a pool of potentially coming back into your business for a 2-year stint. The other thing that I would like to say, though, is please be very careful about calculating your PAYE, because the cost of bringing on somebody is not just the salary. There is other costs as well that are associated with that. And you can easily forget that when you are recruiting. So please don't forget about that. And before recruiting, please don't forget to engage an HR person, as Geoff said earlier, because they will help you cross the T's. Is it dot the T's? Oh no, I don't know. You know what I mean. Yeah, cross the T's and dot the I's. That's very important, because otherwise you're going to get yourself into trouble, and you might then have to be paying money out that you didn't anticipate you're going to be paying. So I would say explore the landscape where you've got people who can jump in on your business and who's not tying you down, before you go on to the next level of actually employing people. And maybe when you get to employing people, think more about the part-time flexible pool before you then go on to the full-time, we're in it for life kind of scenario.
I think that's really good advice. And you're right about the forecasting. Remember, national insurance went up in April this year. So if you had calculated in the past, make sure you recalculate it. And we use an external payroll management company we've used for years. And again, small business, wonderful, wonderful founder who I absolutely love, who is, doesn't cost us a fortune, but at the end of the line, they go, like early this year, I was like, right, tell me now, what's happening in April? What's the impact? Tell me what I need to know. Information is just like absolutely gold. There's, arm yourself with as much information as you possibly can. There's one topic I want to touch on in we've got like 9 minutes left, and I wanted to touch on it, and we're talking about growth, and that is pricing. It's because doesn't necessarily mean selling more growth. Sometimes you put your prices up. Sometimes you have to put your prices up. We know there's been lots of cost increases across the board in the last couple of years. And it's funny, we are lots of questions about pricing actually. And it's funny how many times small businesses say to us, I can't put my prices up, or I have to put my prices down, because they're worried about cost of living crisis. They're worried about consumer spend. They're worried about people not being able to afford them. And my big picture thing is never put your prices down, always put your prices up. That may sound a bit bonkers, and it may sound very generalist. However, you've got to know the value of what you're doing. You cannot sell stuff less than it costs you to deliver, because you're going to go under. And if your current customer can't afford it, there's a conversation to be had about value, but there's also other customers out there. And that's incredibly trite and incredibly general across every sector that there is. But as a general rule of thumb, that is my view. If you're thinking about putting your prices down, put your prices up. And actually, you can grow by delivering more value, making customers understand what you're delivering them, and how it's bringing value and quality to their life and their business and what they're doing. And that can help you grow too. And actually, what we also know is that businesses put their prices up, they can reach different customers who associate price with quality. And actually, that can actually attract more people in. So that's my big picture thoughts on pricing. But I want to go and talk particularly because we have some different sectors here. So I'm keen to know your thoughts. Betsy?
The best thing I ever heard about pricing was a comparison to the wine list in a restaurant. If you're going out for a special occasion, you may not buy the most expensive bottle of wine, but you might buy the second most expensive bottle of wine. And there is a value perception of exactly what you said. The more something costs, the more appropriate it is for the situation. And as a gift business, I have to really channel that a lot, because sometimes a gift is you just want a quick, relatively sort of pocket-friendly gift to give to a contact or an associate. But I want to find the people who are wanting to give the gift, the best Christmas present, that competitive auntie who wants to buy the best thing that's so appropriate for the person that she's buying it for, so that the person feels seen, feels valued, feels loved. That doesn't come at a £5 price tag. And they are not thinking of a price tag when they're looking for the best gift to buy. And it's really hard market to be in gifting and food, because there is this notion of I could make it myself is one thing that you're battling all the time. And the other notion that it's not even a notion, you have smaller, maybe hobby business coming along where they're not looking at their profit. And so their prices are unrealistically low. And it does muddy the waters for other businesses in that zone, because people start to then have a concept of price being lower than it should be. And with the likes of Temu and Shine or Sheen, however you want to pronounce it, that are doing things that are so cheap now, it cannot be a race to the bottom. You cannot try to be the cheapest. You will break your heart in the same way at the same time as you're breaking your bank balance. And none of us are in it for that feeling and that reality. So I'm with you. I'm put your prices up, know your value, really understand who your customer is. And like you say, if people are not buying, if you're not getting in front of the right people with the right product, then it's much bigger conversation than just how much you're charging.
Thanks for that, Betsy. That was an incredibly thoughtful response. Thank you. And I mean, I heartily agree. But Geoff, you're coming from a very different perspective, a different kind of business. Your customers are not consumer customers. You're selling to businesses. What are your thoughts on this?
There's so much to this. There's lots and lots. I mean, for example, within construction, you'll see multi-million-pound companies that are running on margins of 1% and 2%. That is no scope for getting it wrong at all. At the end of the day, if they're turning over 100 million, 1 or 2% is a decent profit. I'd quite happily have 1 or 2% of 10 million. But your scope for getting it wrong is horrendously close. The second thing I would say is there are times I'm stuck up on my wall. I always have literally, I'm going to turn my head to it. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash flow is reality. That is absolutely. There are times when it might be appropriate for you to drop your prices, and I'll try and explain that. If you find yourself in a position, for example, the January period of time, when you're not going to be getting the sales that you might normally be getting, so particularly if it's seasonal trade, at that point in time, in order to cover your bills and get the cash flowing into your organization at that point, it might be appropriate to put on a sale or drop your price at that point in time. Other than that, it's never appropriate. Always look for the kind of clients that are there to see the value in what you do. I would also say, and this is something I've seen kill so many small construction businesses, don't rely on one client or one purchaser. Okay. In my opinion, if your profit margin is 10%, then you have to have at least 10 customers. Okay, because otherwise you're going to be at a loss if one of those customers goes bust. Okay, and I've certainly seen many where they've effectively got a really big contract.
That's a really good rule of thumb, actually. We've got 10% margin, have at least 10 customers. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, so that's something I've always based our business on. But essentially, take a look at what your profit margin is, accept that there's a possibility that those clients may not come back, etc. And I just use that as a really good benchmark for doing it. So if you can try and expand the number of you're at less risk. Okay, so therefore you can potentially have a smaller less profit in there. So you can look at your pricing, and sometimes the market can be very price based. So there are times when it might be appropriate, but that's not a good fundamental business practice.
No, I agree. We're running out of time. Lara, 30 seconds on pricing.
30 seconds. Don't undervalue yourself. Don't undervalue your staff. Don't undervalue your sector. You've got to focus on the value that you bring into the market, and your tribe's going to be attracted to that. They will walk away if they think that you've cheapened whatever it is they value, and it's not going to be any good for you. If you're a sustainable business, the more reason why you have to be transparent with your customers, and they will know because they are your tribe, and they will be expecting you to be pricing at a particular level. If you don't do that, it might be detrimental.
It's so true. It's so true. And sometimes it can feel like it's a bit terrifying, but stay strong. Know your worth. know your value, know the market that you're sitting in. And, you know, because if you are giving your money away to customers at the expense of your business continuity, that's no good for anyone. It's no good for your customers because you won't be there next year. Look, this has been a really fab session. Thank you so much for all the comments in the chat. Thank you to my fantastic panel. I think Emma's going to pop a slide on the screen in just any second now. There's go and check out Lloyds Bank Academy. Loads and loads of stuff going on there. Lots and lots of free help and advice. I know that Gail's been dropping links in the chat as well. You can get a free Skillsoft Percipio license. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Percipio license. Free help and advice, all free. Completely free. The thing one of the things that I wish I had learned actually as a small business when growing was to go out there and find some help, go and get some help early. I spend way too much time trying to do it all on my own. Completely ridiculous. What was I thinking? There is so much help out there, so much goodwill. Please give us your feedback on the webinar. There's a QR code there. We're going to email you after this with a catch-up link, with a link for your feedback as well. There are loads more things going on. Please do stay tuned. We'll be in touch about the second in our series of growth webinars. So please do keep an eye on your email. And the last thing I want to say is go and have a fabulous growth week. Go and grow your business. Go and grow with confidence in your pricing, confidence in your value. We are here for you. Have a great time. See you soon.